All right, ladies and gentlemen, good evening to you. Open your Bibles to John chapter 21, and we're going to begin at verse number 15. John 21:15. I said this to you back in September when we started with John chapter 1. I said, God willing, we'll finish this at the end of the quarter before the summer begins. And here we are. God willing, we'll finish this before the class is over, because that's the end of the quarter. In fact, we may end up finishing it with 15 minutes to spare. In which case, I have 1 John pulled up right here, ready to go as a segue. But we'll see what happens. But we'll begin in John chapter 21, verse 15. Let me start by just setting the stage in case we forgot from last week. Jesus, of course, is resurrected, and he's appeared several times to various people. He's made 3 appearances in the book of John to his disciples. In John's writing of the recordings of Jesus' appearances. And we are on the third one. The first 2 famously without Peter, and then without Thomas, and then with Thomas, and now here we are, not with all of them together, just a handful of them were on a boat. They went fishing, and the Lord has appeared on the shore and has called them over to him. And he did that by getting their attention with words and then also with deeds. He did a great miracle where they had fished all night and hadn't caught anything, very reminiscent, deliberately so, to the beginning of Jesus' time with them. And then he says, cast on the other side. So they do, and then they collect a great bounty of fish. And so in the midst of this, Peter jumps out of the boat, leaves his brethren to fend for the fish themselves, and he just goes straight to the Lord and sits there among them. And as he approaches, he sees the Lord already has fish on a fire, ready for them. They're going to have a nice meal together. And the other disciples come and join. They all kind of gather around, and it's time for this feast. And this marks the end of the book of John. So let's just pick it up right there. Verse 15 of John 21. So when they had dined, Jesus said to Peter, Simon, son of, my Bible says Jonas. Your Bible might say Jonah. It's a John. That would be the modern version of the word, but whatever. Simon, son of Jonas, do you love me more than these? He said to him, Yea, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, Feed my lambs. So the Lord has some unresolved business with his most emotional disciple. So he turns to Peter, and he's been Peter for a year and a half or so. Don't have the exact timetable, but roughly a year and a half. But when the Lord addresses him here, John writes, he said to Peter, but when Jesus speaks, the words are Simon. So he addresses him by his earthly name, for lack of a better description, instead of the name that Jesus gave him. Now, obviously there's some symbolism to this. There's some point to this. The Lord is choosing his words carefully. I think that's fair to say. I would also point out that God changes Abram's name to Abraham, and he's always from then on Abraham. God changes Sarah's name, and she's always Sarah. When Jacob becomes Israel, there is a long period of time in which he goes by both. And even after he sees the stairway to heaven, and he sees the angels ascending and descending, and God gives him the name Israel, he still will go by Jacob. Not necessarily like in a casual sense, but just because almost as if he's known by both names. This is obviously long before surnames came about. That didn't come about to the Black Plague. So we're long before surnames. They didn't have last names, but they would be known by various monikers. Jacob, Israel, back and forth. Peter, given the name, but throughout the New Testament record, he's called Simon Peter or Peter. And so it's not like he dropped Simon forevermore and he bristled when anyone ever called him Simon. It's not like that. He was Simon Peter. It just became an addition to his name. But I think there's symbolism and a symbolic significance to the Lord not calling him the name that he purposefully gave him. He was Simon, and he said, I'm going to call you Peter. Matthew 16, you're going to be the rock, or at least a rock. You're going to be a rock in the kingdom of the Lord. But here, not post-ascension, not post-resurrection, not post-crucifixion, but in this context, post-denying me 3 times. When you weren't acting like a rock, when you're acting soft and weak. So I'm not going to call you that. I'm going to call you Simon. Simon, son of John. Is giving him the relationship, identifying him by his earthly relationship. Not I have called you, you are mine, you are my disciple, you are my apostle, you are my follower, but no, you are John's son, or Jonas' son. Now, if there's significance to that, that's what it is. What you have here, and we're going to go into this for several verses. In fact, it's basically the last big thing of this book. Peter has denied the Lord 3 times. And at the end of that, when the rooster crows, your Bible says he goes out and weeps bitterly. And that's the last you read about it. You don't have Peter moping. You don't have Peter, stewing over it or fretting over it or talking about it, seeking therapy or anything like that. Anything that you would typically think would be normal and appropriate. I'm not saying it's not normal or not appropriate to do those things. But Peter doesn't do those things. Instead, the Lord rises, and it's just business as usual for Peter. I mean, he does this thing when he goes to the tomb and back with John, and he talks with the ladies who saw the Lord. And all this is happening, and Peter's just kind of a player moving through the production with everybody else. But you don't get this moment where Peter comes to terms with his betrayal of the Lord. Judas betrayed the Lord, but he's dead now. Peter betrayed the Lord 3 times. He's still alive. And so there's nothing the Lord can do with Judas, but the Lord can still use Peter. And so we've got to work that out. That is just a hanging chad. We've got to resolve that. And I don't want to put too much into this that's not there. Forgive me if I'm doing that. But it just seems like, based on how we know Peter's character is and how Peter is not the kind of person. I think you can just see that in the way he's written in the 4 gospel accounts. He's not the kind of person to do much reflective, navel gazing and introspection. He's not the kind of person to stop and stew over his past. He seems a very forward guy, to the point of lurching forward when he should think before he leaps. He just leaps and then thinks after he's landed, usually on his face. He doesn't do much backward reflecting. And it just seems to me, if that's his characteristic, that he's done this horrible thing that he knows was horrible. He wept bitterly over it. Contrition, remorse. And now he's just moved on. But he really hasn't resolved that with the one that he betrayed. And this is that opportunity. And the way the Lord goes about bringing that out of him, bringing the resolution of all of that out of him, is what you see play out over these next several verses. And it begins with the Lord identifying him by his human name and his human relationships. Simon, son of John, detaching him entirely from Jesus for the illustrative purposes of this restoration. And then he asks the question, do you love me more than these? We assume that these is the other disciples around. He won't ask that question again. That part of it, the these part, it's just, that's how he opens it. Do you love me more than these? How much do you love me? Basically, is his question. Agape is the root of the word love here. It's the word that we think about so often when we talk about Jesus and we talk about the love of Christ, and rightly so. We talk about Christian love, and rightly so. That's from here. If you jump over to 1 John, that's the theme, basically, of 1 John, is putting Christianity into practice by practical loving people. Loving the Lord, loving each other, showing the lost people your love, etc. That's agape. So Jesus uses that word. Jesus uses the servant kind of love. Not that it's not emotional, not that it's dry and heartless, but just it is the love that compels you to do. The love that compels you to act to the point of sacrifice. Which in Peter's case is relevant. Because when he was put in a situation where rubber met road, and he had to show, I agape the Lord, that I love the Lord to the point of sacrifice, he instead denied the Lord so that he would not, in his mind, potentially be sacrificed with the Lord. That's significant. Do you love, agape, do you serve me to the point of death more than you love these people? Peter's reply, yes, Lord. You, my Bible says knowest. No. Does your Bible say that? Does anybody's Bible not have some derivative of the word know? K-N-O-W? It's eido in the Greek. You perceive. Sometimes it's translated as see, but it's not like with your eyes you see. That would be blepo. This is like an intuition kind of seeing. Like when you say to somebody, I see what you mean. You see what I mean? See. It's not, you don't see. You perceive. You get it. It's intuitive. Lord, you've been around me long enough. It's by osmosis, you know. It's soaked in to your perceptions. You can tell by the vibes. You can perceive that I love you. Does everybody's Bible say love? Jesus says agape. Peter says phileo. And he said, feed my lambs. That's not the end of it. There's more to it. So let's keep going. We'll come back to Peter's usage of the word versus Jesus. We keep reading. Verse 16. So he says a second time. Incidentally, he talked last, and he talks first. Do you love me? You know I love you. Or basically, do you love me with a servant's heart enough to die for me? And he says, you know that I am crazy about you. That I am passionately in love with you. I want to be around you. I want to have a relationship with you. I want to cultivate that relationship. I want to grow that relationship. I want us to be around each other because I like your company. I want to sit and just be in your presence. Phileo. I am crazy about you. It's not what I asked, but it sounds nice. It's very emotional. That's very Peter. It's very passionate. That's very Peter. But that wasn't the word. That wasn't what he was asked. We'll come back to that. So Jesus hears that response, and his response to that is, feed my sheep, my little lambs. Feed my little lambs. Whether there's any significance to, because he'll say later, my lambs, not little, but regular full-size lambs. If there's any significance to that, you can draw your own conclusions out of it. I really don't think there's much import there. It's just, you have work to do. There are sheep who need a shepherd. This shepherd is ascending. You're staying behind. You need to be their bishop. You need to be their pastor. You need to be their shepherd. As do the others, but he's talking to Peter. So I've got lambs who need shepherding. I need you on the ball. I need you on your game. I need you focused. I need you not doing what you did before the last time you were put in a pressure situation. You crumpled like a daisy in the heat. I need you to be resilient and stout-hearted, strong-spined. So feed my lambs. Verse 16. So then Jesus says again. It doesn't just say he said it again. If John had just said, does everybody's Bible say a second time in verse 16?
Yes.
He doesn't just say, so then he repeats himself. Because he's not repeating himself just to repeat himself. It's not just for emphasis' sake. He said a second time, putting the emphasis on there's a specific numerical value here. There's a certain number of times Jesus is going to say this, and he's halfway through. So he said a second time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? Again, agape. And Peter says to him, Lord, you know, again, Ido, that I phileo you. And so Jesus says again, feed my sheep. Probaton, older sheep. But again, I'm not putting, if you want to, if you think it's there, have at it. I just don't think there's much significance on the sheep words here. I think the more significant thing is the number of times he says it, what he says, and especially the dueling love words here. That is the real word battle going on between these two people. That's lost in the English translation, which just gives you love, 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 love. Because Jesus says to you agape, and Peter blows right by that word. Do you serve me with enough conviction to die for me? And he says, I am crazy about you, as if that's a sufficient answer. But here's the thing. Here's what I want you to get out of this. I don't want you to take away from this that phileo love, the word that Peter's using over and over, is like a lesser form of love. Because you're not supposed to rank them highest to lowest. Because then where do you put family love? Where do you put your spouse or eros love? Is that at the bottom? I don't know. These are not ranked A, B, C, D. They're just different forms of love. Different forms of your convicting emotional center that compels you to do and act on behalf of others. You express them in different ways. But phileo is very singularly unique. Because agape, and I'm not downplaying agape. Agape is Christian love. It is Christ's love, Christian love. It is the love that makes us unique to the world. Because the world will love its own, but we will love everybody. I mean, we will sacrifice and die for anybody. Whoever needs to and we are called to, we will do. Because Jesus loved you that much, and he says, now you go love others that same amount. That's the call. I'm not downplaying agape. But agape is, by definition, not exclusive, but inclusive to everybody. There's nobody you can't agape. Storge, you can only storge love your family. Your mama, your dad, your siblings, your children, your in-laws, when they come into the family, storge love comes with it. Okay? That's that protective, nurturing, you can't make fun of my sister, but I can kind of love. That's storge love. Right? That's what it is. And it's beautiful and special in its own unique way, but it's exclusive to just your family. Eros love, erotic love, that's just between you and your spouse. And you can't share that with anybody else or it's abomination. So that's exclusive to just one person. Storge to just one group of people. Agape has to be for everybody. Phileo love is the love of passionate relationship And we use that word, as so many words like this we make it sound romantic. This is not a romantic word. Okay, eros love is the romantic love. But phileo love is the love of I like being around you. I like hanging out with you. We share common interests. I like just sitting and talking, or just sitting in silence with you. If I'm hurting, I just like to know you're close by. If I'm laughing, I want you laughing with me. I'll text you to tell you the same joke because we have a similar kind of rapport. That's phileo love. I want to be around you, and I don't like not being around you. And that's all poured into phileo love, and you hold that. You retain that for yourself, and you get to exclusively decide who you share that with. And it comes naturally. You just form relationships. You form things that go beyond friendship to just close-knit connections. It's why Philadelphia is the word and not agapadelphia. That's why it's phileo adelphos. Because it's this person who is not your kin that you love so much he was like your brother. Philadelphios. It's like you came from the same womb, out of the same delphos, out of the same womb. But you're not. You're completely different people. So you don't have storge love. So what do you call that? It's not just friendship. It's love. It's a deep connection with somebody. That's not romantic. It's purely platonic, but it is deep and it is real. And we don't have a word for that, but the Greeks did, and it's phileo. So do not read this and think Peter is trying to skirt the question by giving Jesus a B-tier kind of love. He is being honest, and he is saying, Lord, I am nuts. I am crazy about you. I like being around you. And that undersells the significance of the passion poured into this word. But that is not the question the Lord asked. And even then, in his answer, it's still not true all the time. Because Peter denies him 3 times. And you cannot, in one hand, say, I love being around you. And at the other hand, say, I don't even know this guy. That we just sync together. And we have such commonality. And then say, I know not the man. You can't do that. And Peter is trying to do that. Because Peter is trying to conveniently forget what he did. And the Lord, who he did it to, is not going to let him. And it's not just because he's trying to shame him or make him feel bad because he hurt his feelings. No, it's because Jesus is leaving the earth and Peter is staying. Peter has work to do. He cannot let that be hanging over him. So, a second time he says, do you agape? Are you loving me enough to serve to the point of death? And Peter, as so often when Jesus spoke, goes right over his head and answers the first thing he thinks about, which is how crazy he is for Jesus. So Jesus says, feed my sheep. Verse 17. So he says to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Is that what your translation says? Or something like that? And yet here, it keeps reading, Peter was grieved because he said the third time, do you love me? He wasn't grieved after question 1. He wasn't grieved after question 2. But he was grieved after question 3. Grieved, grieving. Jesus asking this question, the way he asked it, the third time he asked it, made Peter grieve. Made Peter sorrowful outwardly. Because grieving is an expression of your inward sorrow. He made Peter, we would presume, weep and cry in anguish and heartbreak because he asked the same question 3 times. The third time Jesus asked the question, he says, Peter, do you phileo? He takes Peter's word and, for lack of a better, throws it back at him. And I imagine if he was speaking in English and he was putting inflection on it the way we would do, he would have said it like this, Peter, do you love me? Are you crazy about me? And the combination of that word that he hadn't used before, that Peter had, being thrown back at him, with the fact that he has asked that question now 3 times, the same amount of times that he betrayed the Lord, coalesced in his mind and broke his heart. And he was forced to pull his head out of the sand and own up to what he had done. And admit to himself that he had some lingering issue that he needs to resolve with his master. Simon, son of John, do you phileo me? And Peter was lupeo. Peter was broken. Peter was grieved. Because he said that third time, do you phileo? And he said to him, Lord, we didn't even read it. I'm sorry, in verse 16, Lord, you know that I love you. It's again, Ido. Okay. Now here, verse 17, Peter's answer, Lord. And you got to remember, he's speaking this in the midst of his grieving. So his voice is cracked. Tears are staining his eyes, and the salt is making it where you can't even see. Lord, you know, Ido, all things. You know, gnosko. You perceive by intuition, and you have been given evidence and proof that you can now make the conclusion definitively. The evidence points to this. You know, gnosko, that I phileo. He doesn't say agape at any point in this conversation. He does. He does. He will, as Jesus is going to say, he will die for the Lord. He will give Jesus as much as a person can give in agape love, which is his own life. But here in this moment, Peter's passionate commitment to his Lord has been called into question by Jesus himself. And he responds with tears, and not once has he ever lied, and with sincerity. Lord, you know it. You can read my heart like an open book. You have the knowledge. You have the evidence. I messed up. I sinned. And then I sinned again. And then I sinned again, even after you told me. And I knew it was coming. I still chickened out, cowardly, denied. But in spite of that, you know that I love you. You know, in spite of my failure, I love you. In spite of my weakness, I want to be around you. And not in spite of, because of. Through my weakness, I am nuts for you. And Jesus says to him, the same as he said before, feed my sheep. And he doesn't shame him. He's going to in a minute for something else he says. He doesn't shame him. He doesn't scold him. He doesn't say, don't you feel terrible? Because he does feel terrible. He's grieving. There's no need to add to that. He just says, all right, so you have work to do. And he will do the work. He will serve. He will be a bishop. And he will be killed. What a tragedy. What a crime. What a horrible thing it would have been had Peter denied 3 times and decided, well, this thing isn't for me. I can't hack it. I can't make it. I have broken my Lord's trust. I assume he'll never trust me again. He'll never give me responsibility again, which, by the way, that's what feed my sheep is. I'm giving you responsibility. They're my sheep. You feed. He'll never trust me again. He'll never put his faith in me again. He'll never send me out to do anything again. I can't serve again because I've sinned before. And so he just quits. He just goes back to being a fisherman for profession. What a great loss to the kingdom to be a temple without a brick. Just glaringly missing. But that's not Peter. And the Lord doesn't let that be Peter. You know that I love you. Verse 18. Jesus continues, verily I say to you, when you were young, you girded yourself and you walked where you wanted to walk. You walked where you would. But when you will be old, you will stretch forth your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you would not. That is to say, where you don't want to go, per se. I think obviously this is, we'll see in the next verse, this is a prediction of Peter's death. And the significance in the context is, you have said 3 times agape, or phileo. I never got the answer to agape, but you're going to love me to the point of death. You are going to give your life for me. Jesus is talking, he's alluding to that here. You'll see that confirmed in the next verse. But I think the way in which this comes to mind is, if you remember previously, Peter jumps off the boat and then swims to shore, and he girds himself and he ties his cloth around him. And so Jesus watches him tie his cloth around him, girds himself. And so that creates the visual for the word picture. When you're young, yeah, you put your own shirt on. You button your own shirt. You zip up your own pants. You do what you want to do. But the day will come when you'll be a prisoner, essentially. When someone else will steer you where they want you to go. And they will stretch out your hands. You won't. They'll force your hands to be stretched out. I think an allusion to the cross. Peter's cross. That certainly is tradition, but I think that's the reason why it is that. And someone else will gird you, and they'll carry you where you wouldn't want to go. And that doesn't mean he doesn't want to die. That means he doesn't love. No, I would remind you that Jesus in Matthew 26, when he was facing his cross, asked God, let this cup pass. But we don't question the Lord's love. just his own human loathing of the suffering that was going to come. So fine, same with Peter. So Jesus makes that statement, which I think the significance to that is just we kind of left agape hanging, but I don't doubt it. I know it. You will die for me. You will live to the point of dying, and then they will give you the opportunity, and you will take it, and you will die for me, which will be the opposite of how Peter thought it was going to go during Jesus' trial, where he is watching Jesus be abused, and to the point of they're about to go kill him, and then they start pointing the finger at him. And, I don't want to die. I don't know the man. I don't know him. I don't know him. But you're going to mature, and you're going to grow, and then when they point the finger at you, you'll say, yes, I am, and you will let them stretch your hands out and kill you. So that's his growth. I would point out, as beautiful as the growth of Peter is, from denier to crucified, presumably man, in the middle, he's still messed up. He still showed prejudice, and he still argued with God, with the vision of the unclean animals. He told God, no, I'm not going to eat those things. He still messes up. He's still Peter. You don't just change your personality. You just shift your priorities, and you work through the parts of your personality that lead you into sin more easily. That's humanity. That's Peter, the very human Peter. Verse 19. So Jesus says that about stretching his hands and so forth. And John says, this he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, follow me. A couple of things to draw out of this. We think of the cross of Jesus, and we glorify Jesus. You think of presumably the cross of Peter, and you glorify Jesus, right? Every apostle, save John, as far as we know, dies, like by execution. And not just because they did something stupid and they were sentenced to die, but no, for their faith. They died for the Lord. And every one of those deaths for the Lord was not to the glory of Matthew or Nathaniel or Simon or Peter or John. Well, John's the one who doesn't die, but those guys, it's not for their glory. We don't look at them and say, look how amazing they were because they were willing to die for Jesus, as if we're standing back here not prepared to do that. That better not be the attitude. Now, we are very fortunate. It is very convenient that we live in a society where we're probably going to live and die of old age, if not, a heart attack or something like that. But no one's going to, from the government, come with swords at our throats or guns to our heads and force us to choose between a bullet and Jesus or something like that. That's not the environment in which we live. So it's very convenient for us to say, yeah, go get him, Peter. Go die for Jesus. I sure would if I was there, but I'm not. But if you were there, would you? And the only two people who know that is you and Jesus. And Peter said, you can read me and you know that I love you. And even he didn't say agape. But when the end of his life came and he had that growth with the Lord, when it was time for his agape sacrifice, he gave his life. And I would hope that if it comes to me, that if the gun is on my head, that yes. Because that's what love is for the Lord. And that's not for me. And you wouldn't look at me and say, wow, how amazing he is, because you should be right behind me, dying next. That should be all of us. So, you died to glorify God. Jesus spoke this, signifying by what death Peter would glorify God. And when he had spoken that, after he says, they're going to take you, stretch out your hands, and kill you. So come follow me. Like, it doesn't seem like you should flip those, right? Get them to agree first and then give them the fine print. But no, that's not Jesus. Come follow me. Where are we going, Lord? To the cross. Come follow me. That's what Jesus says. I'm going to die for you. Come die for me. It'll be great. Verse 20. So then Peter turned around, and he saw the disciple whom Jesus loved, the same one who leaned on his breast at the Last Supper, the same one who said, Lord, who is it that betrays you? During the conversation. We presume this is John, because he doesn't give him his name. It's presumed John's talking about himself, and you'll get a little bit of evidence of that toward the end of this chapter. So, point is, Peter turns around, and he sees John is following close by. So I guess they're not sitting around the fire anymore. Or does it say walking? I read it, but I didn't read. Following. Okay, following, yeah. So not in the proverbial sense. They're just walking now. They've gotten up from the fish, and they're walking around. They're walking on the beach. And he sees John is following close by. So verse 21, Peter sees him and says to Jesus, Lord, my Bible phrases it like this, what shall this man do? But there's no do in the original. It's just, what about this guy? Which is just classic Peter. And it's just like, you just had this beautiful little moment with the Lord. And it ended on this very significant prophecy of your death. And all you can do is just be Peter in that moment and just say, what's going to happen to him? Let's run through the gamut. What happens to him next? Will he die too? What will happen to him? What will happen? Very Peter. Very Peter. And I had a thought in my head about this. How I will get onto Joshua, my Joshua, who's 9, almost 10. And he'll do something. It doesn't matter what. It's never anything terrible, but it's bad enough that I have to at least lecture. I rarely have to spank him anymore. Because I'm older now. If it was Jack or Caleb, I mean, spank him all the time. But I just lecture, and that's enough, because he's such a whiny. He'll just cry, and that's good enough. Once you're crying, I don't need to spank him. So I'll lecture. And I feel like the point has been made, and it's all over, and we separate, and 5 minutes pass. Just 5 minutes. 300 seconds. And he's laughing and playing and hopping around and showing me things, and I'm still kind of mad, because I have an old man brain, and you just did that thing. And yes, we've worked it out since then, but I'm still kind of bothered by that. And I'll just kind of be grumpy and say, what's wrong? Al, what's wrong? It's 10:15, and at 10 o'clock you did this. But I forget he has like a goldfish brain. 15 minutes for him is an eternity. He's way moved on. Peter just had this beautiful moment, but he's still Peter. He can't help it. He just can't help it. What's going to happen to John? Like, spoil the moment, why don't you? So Jesus has to say, verse 22, If I will that he lives until I come back, which is really your first allusion to his second coming so far, if it is my will that he tarries until I come back, then what is that to you? And I repeat myself, follow me. You just worry about your own self. You take care of yourself. You mind your own business. Don't worry about what will happen to everybody else. Now take that and combine it with the next verse, 23. Then went this saying abroad among the brethren, that the disciple, that's referring, we presume, of John, that the disciple should not die. Yet Jesus didn't say to him, he shall not die. He just said, if I will that he tarries till I come, then what is that to you? In other words, by the time of John's writing, it had gotten around that Jesus, and you can see why this would happen, because by the time of John's writing, late first century, he's probably the only apostle left alive. Most of them died a few decades ago. So he's still kicking. And then the word starts to trickle. Just before Jesus ascended, he said to John that he'll live forever until Jesus comes back. And they might be using John as some kind of a divine yardstick to see, if he's about to die, that means Jesus is about to return. The first century Christians were completely messed up about the second coming of Christ. So many letters either are directly about that or reference it here and there because the brethren just completely were off their rocker about the nature of the second coming, when it was happening, and so forth. They thought, you know how we always have some nut who says, it'll be 1984, and he sells his books until 1985, and then he doesn't sell them anymore. It'll be 2003, whatever. There's always some nut who says it's coming that year. That was every Christian in the first century. Before the second century, he'll come back. And so they said, John's going to live until Jesus comes back, and he sure looks like he's not going to make it much longer. He's looking pretty old. We have to carry him around. He can barely talk. So the Lord must be about to come back. So this is written to kind of, I think, to dampen that down. He never said he's going to live forever. He just said, if God wanted that. The point is, it's not your business. That was the point Jesus was making. Verse 24. And this is the disciple which testifies these things. Well, who is writing this book? Who is testifying the things that we're reading? The book of John. It is John. And John is identifying himself here as the disciple, which I think is here at the end of the book, his tell that all the times throughout this book when he referenced this disciple whom Jesus loved, the disciple who leaned on his breast, the disciple, he now at the end says, and that's me. I don't think he's leaving it as vague as we try to think it is. The disciple who testifies these things and wrote these things, and we know that his testimony is true. Verse 25. And there are also many other things which Jesus did, the which, if they should be written every one, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that be written. So similar to the end of chapter 20, to the point where it's almost like, is this the exact same text? Was it just copied twice? There is some subtle differences here, not just in the language, but like in the context. And I think the distinction between the two is this. In the end of John 20, you have Jesus making these two very significant appearances to the disciples, the apostles, and without Thomas and then with Thomas. And he eats in front of them, and he offers for them to touch him, to see that he's flesh and blood, not a spirit, to touch his spear-pierced side, his holy hands, literally holy hands, and to do all that. And then John says, and he did many other things in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written, touch my hands, I'll eat in front of you, here I am, flesh and blood. These are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and believing him I have life in his name. That's the end of John 20. Connecting it specifically to, this is a real flesh and blood person who proved to us in that upper room moment he was flesh and blood. And he did other things to prove that to us as well. They're just not written down. Here, more broad, more big picture. Here is the end of the writing. The end of the ministry of Jesus is recorded by John, which took a very specific and narrow focus. The first half on 7 miracles that he does, and the second half on his passion, his resurrection, his promised second coming after his ascension. All of that in the second half of John, that very uniquely structured, specific gospel account that only covers just a sliver of the pie of that Jesus did. But even if you added Matthew and Mark and Luke to it, you still just get a sliver of the pie of all that he did. Even though his ministry was only 3 years long, the world, if everyone wrote down the way in which Jesus touched them, if everyone wrote down the way in which Jesus moved them, if everyone wrote down their own, I hate to use the word, but there it is, testimony of the way in which Jesus changed their life, you would run out of paper, you would run out of ink, and you would run out of writing utensils. That's the song. If the oceans were ink, if the sky was paper, and every blade of grass was a quill, and every person alive was a scribe, you'd run out of paper, you'd run out of ink, you'd run out of pens, but you would never run out of testimony. You would never run out of deeds. Because all our lives continue. And we will have children, and they will become Christians, and Christ will move through them, and will change their lives, and they will have children, and Christ will move through them until the end comes. And there is no more sky the way that we perceive it. That's the beautiful poetic end to this. The world itself cannot contain the books that should be written if we were just to write down everything that Jesus did. And it's not just for 3 years, because you will run out of things that Jesus did in his ministry. But the effect of his ministry, as is his kingdom, is everlasting. And that's the end of John chapter 21. That's the end of John. We have 6 or 7 minutes. Any comments or questions from anybody?
Matthew?
Yes, ma'am.
I had somebody comment to me once that, with this verse saying that, remember, Jesus was also way at the beginning with God. Mm-hmm. And he was part of that, the creation account.
Sure.
And he always thought that that's what that was meaning, going even way back then. Not just the years of his ministry, but before the world's even begun. And that's true, but in that case, what you're doing is you're still setting a finite limit to it. Like if we start right now and work backwards, you'll eventually go back to, in the beginning, God said, let there be light. And it's a lot of stuff, but there is still a finite number of things that he did. But if you add to that all the ways that Christ has worked through you and through his people, well, you'll never run out of things because his people will continue doing on his behalf. His people will continue serving and agape loving and being Christians, and they will make disciples who will continue, and he will continue until there is no more continuing. So yes, you can go backwards and you can start with the Son who is pre-incarnate but everlasting. But you still work backward to let there be light. There's still a finite there. But you open it up the other way. In what ways has Christ moved through you, has done through you? Well, then there's never ending. And that's just me being poetic. It could be that's what it means, that's all it means. But I like mine better. All right. Anybody else have anything for the bell ring? But that's the plan. That's all I have. Don't tell your children. I'll let you out early. You can go early. Thanks, everybody.